Yeah, that didn't last long.
Hey, kia ora, Helen Brahms here, coming live from Sun City in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic, sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1246, A Widow's Life. Yeah, today happens to be what would have been my 24th wedding anniversary. And it'll be my sixth one since Brad passed. Since he passed in September, and our wedding anniversary is in December. And people go, why is your wedding anniversary in December, like just before New Year's? Brad's answer was, she was my tax write-off for the year. That was Brad's answer for why we got married in December. I was the tax write-off for the year, and it turned out I actually was. I got him back a lot of money that year. But no, we had a great almost 19 years together when he passed, and I would not change one moment of it, not one. Even if I knew what was going to be happening, I would still have stood there next to him and said, I do. There was absolutely no question about that. But what's a widow's life like? It's different for everybody. Everybody, widow, widower, all have different experiences, all go through different things. We all go through the emotional roller coaster, especially around birthdays, anniversaries, holidays. December is a particularly hard month for me because we have my birthday, Christmas, and our wedding anniversary. And we had a rule in the house because Brad was sort of like, why does everything have to come in December? And I'm like, sorry, I can't help that. But I'm not the one that chose to make me a tax write-off for the year and get married before the end of the year. And I didn't have any option when I was born. And so I came up with this little rule thing for him because it was always like, oh, it means I got to get 3 gifts in the month of December. Da 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 da. I said, okay, here's what we're going to do for the month of December. You can either get 1 gift for birthday, 1 gift for Christmas, or 1 gift for wedding anniversary. Excuse me. Or you can combine all 3 into one big present that you have the option of giving it to me as early as my birthday, which was the 9th, and as late as our wedding anniversary on the 28th. So you can give it to me anytime during, as early as the 9th, as late as the 28th, or any time in between. Unless, and he was sort of like, oh, unless the birthday or the anniversary ends with a 5 or a 0, then that one has to have a separate gift. And he was like, okay, I can deal with that. I can deal with it. And that's what we used to do. And then I made it really easy for him one year because one year he bought me this really beautiful Mystic Topaz bracelet. And then the following year for my birthday, we were happened to be down at the Jewelry Mart and his mum was with us. And she saw a ring that matched my bracelet and bought that for me for my birthday. So when we got home from that trip, I said to Brad, I said, I've figured out what you can get me next year for the December gift and the following year. He's like, what? He was like, all 2 years taken care of. I can do that. I don't have to think for a gift for 2 years. I said, well, what about matching earrings and a necklace to go with the bracelet and the ring? He's like, okay. So he called up our jeweler in LA there and explained to him what he wanted. And of course, she told him that she could get the best deal for him if he bought them both together rather than separate years. So for 2 years, he had one of my presents sitting in the drawer there, and the other one only lasted in there a year because he ordered them in the January or February. And so he had one sitting there for a few months. The other one had to wait till the following year. So, and they both came in the same case, which kind of annoyed him a little bit because, the earrings were sitting there with the necklace and they were all in the same case. And so I said, well, you'll figure it out. He did. So, that was what we used to do. And but today would have been our 24th wedding anniversary. And I'm so like, wow, 6 years. This is my 6th one without him. It is my 6th year watching Legally Blonde on our wedding anniversary. And I started that tradition 6 years ago on the first one. And the reason I started that tradition is that Legally Blonde was one of our favorite movies. If Brad was channel surfing and Legally Blonde was on, he would stop and push play and would be watching Legally Blonde. And that was and it didn't matter what time of the day, and especially when he had the cancer and was going through treatments and everything else, if he found Legally Blonde, he watched it. Me, I couldn't care less. I enjoyed the movie. It's a great movie. But a lot of times I was just like, I'm just going to sit here and read, do puzzles, or I'm going to go do some work or something like that. And I've lost count of the number of times we have watched that movie in whole, in parts, coming on and partway through it. He didn't care if they were halfway through the movie. He didn't care if they were 15 minutes towards the end of the movie. He would watch it. And we actually went and saw Legally Blonde, the musical, at the Kennedy Center, and we were not that impressed with it, to be honest. And we weren't that impressed. All the musical seemed to be was like all the good little, all the great one-liners included with some music, and that was basically it. We did not enjoy it as much as we enjoyed the movie. So I couldn't even tell you who was acting in it. I know we had great seats. We had box seats. They were awesome. We were actually sitting on tall like bar stools with backs on them and armrests on them, so that we could see over the head of the people that were in front of us in the box. So there's 2 rows in a box. There was the lower seats, then there were the higher seats, and we were able to see, and we had a clear view of the entire stage. We were center to we were one box to the right of where, I think we're in box number 2 or 3. I can't remember how the counting goes, but box number 1 is where you would have the dignitaries sit. Like if the president was there, that would be his. That was his box, and so we were one to the right of that. So we had really good seats, and unfortunately, both of us just looked at each other and goes, "Not doing it for us." But Brad would watch that movie. We would watch that movie over and over and over and over and over again. I've lost count of the number of times we've seen it in part and full. And then one day, out of the blue, we're sitting there. And Brad suddenly goes, "We got married there." And I'm like, "What?" Like I was reading. And I was looking at me, "What?" He goes, "We got married there." I go, "Where?" And he goes, "Here." And he gets the remote. We had DVR, winds it back, plays it again. They do this shot from at the back and then zero in on the table. And sure enough, Al and Warner are sitting at a table on the exact spot that Brad and I stood and got married. And I was so like, "Oh my gosh." And I said, "Yeah, that's it." I said, "There's the hoopah that they have there, and there's the fountain, the share of fountains over there." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And so I went and had a look, and we got married there in 98. And I think, if I remember correctly, Legally Blonde came out like 99. No, I think it was like 2000, 2001, somewhere around there. It was not long after we had gotten married that the movie came out. And like I said, we had lost count of the number of times we'd seen that movie, we had seen that scene, and we had never, ever noticed it until Brad just one day said, "We got married there." And so that sort of became like our wedding movie. So I thought one way to honor Brad is that he loved the movie so much that on our wedding anniversary, on the first wedding anniversary I had without him, is that I was going to watch Legally Blonde. And so every year since then, on our anniversary, I sit down and I watch Legally Blonde. So that's going to be our movie tonight. Well, hello. That's going to be our movie tonight, isn't it, Zeph? We're going to watch Legally Blonde? Yes. She's been very attentive today, coming up and just hopping up next to me. And usually I have to bribe her with treats to get her up here. But she's been popping up next to me a lot today. Like she knows that it's a special day. And she does the same on Brad's birthday. She did the same on my birthday. Did the same on yesterday. All those special days, she hops up next to me for no reason and just sits there. And yeah, usually I've got to bribe her with treats to get her to come up next to me. Or food. If I'm sitting here eating, she'll jump up. But yeah, so, that was one tradition that I have started, that I started since he passed. But as far as being a widow's life goes, what's it like? It's like I said, it's very different for everybody. Grief is one of those things that will kick you in the butt at any time, anywhere. You have really no control. It could be a song that you hear that will trigger you. It could be somebody who looks like the person who has passed. And I'm not just talking a spouse or a partner. I'm also talking kids as well. Whoever in your life that you've been close to that has passed, grandparents, parents, siblings, children, grandchildren, grief will kick you in the butt whenever it feels like it. And it sucks. I have really bad humor when it comes to death and things, but it's sort of like they got the easy ride. Those of us left behind, we've got the harder journey to do. Excuse me. We have the harder journey to do because we have to go on living without them being next to us physically or being with us physically. The number of times when I've been out driving Sparkles, we both had this dream of getting an RV and doing these extended road trips and everything else, and taking Gus with us. And Gus, for those that don't know, was our dog who was 13 and a half years old when he passed, and he went 18 days before Brad did. So Brad went the 24th of September, and Gus went the 6th of September and of the same year. So they were 18 days apart, and he was 13 and a half. And we'd always had this dream of getting an RV and doing these extended road trips and taking Gus with us. So when it came time of thinking, and we'd always made major decisions together. We'd sat down, we'd talked about them, we worked out what we wanted to do, where we wanted to go. If we're going to do this, does it help us get towards our goals that we want to go for, or does it put us in the opposite direction of where we want to go? And so we'd sit down and talk about this and talk about those things. And all of a sudden, I was having to make all these decisions myself, and I was lost. I was totally lost. I had no idea who I was. For the first time in my life, I was living by myself. I had never lived by myself in my entire life up until that point. I was 50 years old, almost 51, and I was by myself for the first time in my life, and all of a sudden, I'm responsible for all of the decisions. I didn't have Brad there to be my sounding board. When I came, there was times that I would come out of the office and go, I've just had a great idea. And I'd flop down on the couch, and he would look at me and go, uh-huh. And then he would turn to me and he'd go, do you need me to respond, or you just need to talk it out? And I'd look at him and go, just listen for now, and then I'll decide. And I think he was trying to figure out which ears he was supposed to have on. She's going to talk about this. She just wants to talk it out, so I really don't have to pay attention ears, or, oh crap, now I have to pay attention. But he would give me his attention, and he would give me his attention. It looked like he was listening, whether he actually was and the times I was just talking it out, he wasn't really listening. You could tell by the half glaze in his eyes. But all of a sudden, I didn't have that person. I could run into the living room, flop down on the couch, and go, I've had an idea. And and have that person to talk it out with. So that was one of the big things. We did so much together, and all of a sudden, I didn't have that person to do that stuff together with. We used to go for Sunday drives, and I got the point where he couldn't drive anymore, so I was doing all the driving. And so we'd go for drives here and there, and to look after the grandson, because we only had one at the time. He loved those days when his grandson would come over, and his oldest grandson would come over, and the two of them just had this very special connection. It was awesome to see. It was awesome. But one of his biggest regrets was that he would never get to see his grandchildren grow up. And since he's passed, we've added three more grandsons, and we've got another one on the way. So it's sort of like, it's hard, because that was something that he wanted to see, was to see his grandkids grow up. He wanted to see the people his grandkids would become, who were they going to be, and things like that. And there you go. And things like that. And every time I get to visit with my grandkids, I've always got that in the back of my mind, that he wasn't there to enjoy it. Yes, he's there spiritually, but he wasn't physically there to be part of their lives. And it kind of hits you. And there's days that you'll just start crying for no reason. And I hate those days. One of the hardest days I had, one of the hardest 40 minutes of my life that I had, was I did my very first cruise. We were supposed to go through the Panama Canal. We actually had the cruise booked to go through the Panama Canal in May of 2018. And we've been talking about doing the Panama Canal for ages. So when this one came available, it was on a cruise line we enjoy. It was on a Celebrity Millennium we were going to be doing this on. It was going to leave out of Fort Lauderdale, go through the Panama Canal, and then come up the West Coast and it was either going to end in San Diego or LA. I can't remember which. So we only had to worry about a one-way flight. And so we were looking forward and doing all the research on it and the places we're going to go visit and deciding what excursions we wanted to do and everything else. And this was well in a year, and it was probably about 18 months in advance of this. And then, of course, when he got sick and he was in hospital, we kept talking about it, because I wanted to make sure that he had stuff to focus on for when he got out of hospital, that, to recover. Because as far as I was concerned, he was going home and he was going to recover, and we'll get to a new normal of life, with his physical limitations and things. And our final payment wasn't due until January of 2018. So when he passed in 2017, and I got the notification in January that my final payment was coming, my little reminder popped up that my final payment was coming up on the cruise. I was like, damn it, totally forgot about that. Well, I can either go and enjoy the cruise by myself, or I can cancel it or do something different. And so I thought, I really don't feel ready to do my very first cruise on a ship I've never been on before, but I was fine. It was Celebrity. I knew what they were like. That was not a problem. But going to countries I didn't know and going to places I didn't know, I didn't want to be that. And for 2 weeks, I've never done a 2-week cruise before. So that's another thing we're looking forward to. It was 2 weeks. And I thought, I've never done that before. So I was a little uncomfortable in myself for my first time out on a cruise without Brad, was to go and do a 14-night cruise to countries I'd never been to before. And so I was sort of like, what else can I do? I'll change it to another, I can still get my money back. We had paid the deposits and everything, and I could still get my money back. That wasn't a problem. But I thought, I'm going to have to go on a cruise at some point. And so I started looking around, and they had Celebrity Solstice doing the Inside Passage. And they had one around the same time as when the Panama Canal cruise was going to go. And it was leaving out of Vancouver, doing the Inside Passage and ending in Seattle. And I thought, our very first cruise in 2009, on our very first cruise, we were on Norwegian Sky, and we did the Inside Passage in and out of Seattle. And I looked at it, and it was basically going to the exact same ports in Alaska that we went to, Ketchikan, Juneau, and Skagway. The only difference is that when we did the Norwegian one, we stopped at Prince Rupert, but we didn't get off the ship that day because it was raining and windy. So we just decided to stay on the ship. And the Solstice was going into Victoria. And so we thought, well, that'll be a good one, because our very first cruise was in Alaska, and this will be a way to close our traveling experience together, and me starting my next trip, my next adventures of traveling by myself. And so switched it over to that, and got our concierge room. We love the concierge level of class on the ship. These little extras, and you get to meet, and the concierge comes up to you while you're standing in line. You got a special line to go into, and the concierge will come and meet with you, and you basically have his number, and you can call him any time of the day or night to get whatever it is you need, and he'll get it all taken care of. If you want to do short excursions, he will book them for you. Anything that you want, he will help you with. So it's kind of like having a butler, but not really, sort of. And so I got on the cruise ship and, flew up to Vancouver. I was actually there the day before the cruise left. Had a horrible night that night. We were in an old hotel. First of all, it showed that it was less than a mile from the rail station, because they have the metro system, the subway system, there in Vancouver. And it took me longer to get there because nothing said that, when you get off this, yes, you got to go down the street, you go down the street, and then you turn, you go up the street. Nothing said that it's uphill the entire way. And I'm pulling a full suitcase with me on a pavement that was asphalt, not concrete. It was cracked. The wheels were getting caught in things. So I got to the hotel. I was exhausted. I needed a shower. And I had like 20 minutes to get ready because I had to be at a restaurant across the road to meet friends of mine that were in Vancouver, and they were coming into town to meet with me. And so I got up to my room, had a quick shower, got fresh clothes on, and ran out the door, leaving a suitcase that was like, bleh, like the suitcase had gone, bleh, and got over there and met with my friends. And then I had the full next day in Vancouver, because I decided I was going to play tourist in Vancouver and do the hop on, hop off bus. And so I got to meet with my friends and that. And first night was okay. Got up the next morning, did the hop on, hop off bus thing the whole day. Had a fantastic day exploring Vancouver, learning a lot of the history and things. And then that night, they had one of their boilers went out. And so you would get this. It was like somebody was out there with one of those jackhammers. It went on for over an hour. They could not get this thing started. They were trying to get it started. And the problem was, it's the middle of the night. It was like 12:15 in the morning. We had single pane glass in the rooms. So you were hearing all the street noises all the time, all the traffic. And even though I was up on the 10th floor, the noise was bouncing around the buildings and echoing and coming into the room and everything else. Then you had this jackhammer noise going on. So I called the front desk and it rang and rang and rang and rang. Finally, somebody answered it and goes, "We're looking into it," click. And I was like, okay, what if I was calling the front desk and it wasn't about that noise? What if I had an emergency? And the next day I was checking out. And so I mentioned this to them at the front desk and they were like, "Oh yeah." No apology, no nothing. They said, "Oh, we had a boiler go out. We're just trying to get it restarted." No apology, no nothing. Didn't matter that the guests had been inconvenienced that night. They'd been hearing everybody bitching about it that morning already. And I said, well, I was not impressed with I said, one thing that concerned me with the person who was on overnight is that they were just picking up the phone and going, "Yeah, we know about it," and hanging up. If that guest had an emergency that they needed that had nothing to do with that, they didn't have a chance to talk to the night person about it because he didn't take the time to listen. I said, I totally get that. I said, I've worked in hotels. I totally understand that he would have been swamped with calls coming in. But the way it was handled, I felt was not the correct way to do that. Because somebody could have been asking for something else instead of complaining about the noise. And they were like, "Oh, okay. We'll mention that to the management for you." No apology, no nothing. So I went down to the ship, got all checked in, got on board the ship and everything else, and did my usual thing of go to the buffet, have lunch. Actually, no, I didn't go to the buffet that day. I actually went to the restaurant and did the a la carte that day. Usually I go up to the buffet and do that, but I sat down at a table for 2 people. They put a guy who was traveling by himself at the table next to me. We had an interesting conversation because he had come in from Hawaii. Actually, he'd been on the ship since Sydney. So he'd taken Sydney to Hawaii up to Vancouver, and now he was going to do the Inside Passage. And he liked to do back-to-back cruises. And his wife decided not to join him for Alaska. So he had done Sydney to Hawaii, and I think she got off in Hawaii because then he was doing the rest of it by himself. But he loved to travel, loved to cruise. And so we just had this chit chat across the tables. And then after I'd finished lunch, I went and did my usual start at the top, walk down through all of, because my room wasn't ready at that point, walk down through all of the public areas, go into the spa, booked my usual embarkation day specials and to help me get into mood and everything. So I did everything normally, finally out into our rooms, went down there. I did have Casey Kiwi with me. If you don't know who Casey Kiwi is my my kiwi bird, teeny but what is it? What are those beanie bags? Beanie Buddy. Yeah, Beanie Buddy. And so I was carrying him everywhere with me, and he was a great conversation starter. It wasn't until we got to doing the muster drill that afternoon before we left port, that I'm standing there with however many hundred of people were in the room with us, because you had to get scanned and everything else. Everybody's standing in couples. There's couples standing over here. There was couples surrounding me. They were standing next to each other, holding hands, arms around each other, talking quietly to each other. And all of a sudden, this huge wave of grief battered at me. It was just this. It just washed over me, and suddenly it dawned on me: this is my life now. And all I wanted to do was just to curl up on the floor and just let loose. And I'm here with hundreds of people. There's however many people in that room with us, and it was the longest 40 minutes of my life, just holding myself together because I did not want to have a breakdown in front of people. This was the muster drill. It was everybody had to attend. And I was like, I just need to get back to my cabin. And I will tell you this: if you've ever been on a ship at muster drill, you never take the elevators. You always take the stairs. You kind of hang back and let the rush go, and then you just kind of wander along behind everybody. No. As soon as that muster drill was over and they said, "We're done," I made a beeline for the elevator. This path opened up in front of me. I got to the elevator. The doors opened in front of me. I just walked straight on in, and I got into the corner, and I stood in the corner taking deep breaths, trying to keep myself calm, trying to keep myself together. And when I had to go three or four floors, and then as soon as I got out of that elevator, I made a beeline for my stateroom, and I got into the stateroom, and the moment that door went click, I let everything go. Suddenly realizing that when I was cruising, it's going to be by myself unless I find a friend or somebody to go with me. I'm basically going to be cruising by myself. And that part was the hardest part of the entire trip. It's been one of the hardest things I've had to do, is going through that moment of realization. Yes, I was going to counseling during that time as well. I had a great counselor. She had actually seen me through the whole time Brad was in hospital, Brad's passing. And for the first 8 months of, because I was with her for a year from starting in June when he had basically gone into hospital. I was with her till the end of June the following year. So she saw me through a lot, and she was awesome. And but that was one of the aha moments, and it was an aha moment I didn't like at all. I did enjoy the rest of the trip. I got my creative juices came flooding back. I got ideas for writing for different storylines. I'd had this book series going on in my head. It's still in my head. Some of it's written down. And this was sort of like a segment, like a spin-off series from this series. So this is my main series, and this was like a spin-off series I came up with as I was walking around Alaska on that trip. But I came back having done a lot of writing while I was on the trip, writing out ideas and things like that. Then I got to Seattle, and I got on a bus and did a bus tour, and then they dropped me off at my hotel. And then the next morning I got picked up and taken to the airport. I didn't get a lot of sleep that night because it was the royal wedding. It was Prince Harry and Meghan Markle getting married. It was their wedding day on the Saturday. So when I got up in the morning, I got up early in the morning to watch the whole procession thing and saw through the whole church service, and then coming out of the church, and before they got into the carriage is when I had to leave to go to the airport to catch my flight home. So I didn't see any of the procession part until later on when I went back and watched it on different channels that were showing it over and over and over again. But yeah, that was one of the hardest trips I'd ever done. And then I got to go on another cruise at the end of that year, which happened to be on my birthday. We were leaving. And this time I was with a group of travel professionals that we had been working together with that I knew. So I had a whole bunch of people that I knew on that cruise. And the cruise line made my birthday special that day. So that was kind of cool. And while I was on that cruise, I decided I was going home to New Zealand for Christmas. And I decided on the Thursday of the cruise, we were getting off the cruise on, was it Friday or Saturday? I think it was Saturday. And I flew home from Florida back to California. And then that Wednesday I was on a plane to New Zealand. And I arrived in New Zealand on the Friday, because when you leave on the Wednesday, you arrive on the Friday. And Christmas was like the Monday or something afterwards. And we got to surprise my brother. That was the best thing ever. But it was my first trip home to New Zealand since Brad had passed. So there were all these firsts, and the firsts are always the toughest. The first birthday without him, the first anniversary without him, his first birthday with him not being there, his the first Yes Day without him. And Yes Day is the day he proposed to me, which was the 25th of April, 1998 is our yes date. And I used to call him up at work on the 25th of April and just go, yes, and hang up. But yeah, you get all of those. You get all of those firsts, and they are tough. And this year was 5 years since Brad passed. And for some reason this year, it's almost like I'd hit a milestone or something, because it seemed tougher this year than it had the last 3 years. I don't know why, but everything is hitting me a lot harder. This in 2022, all of our yes anniversary, birth dates, and wedding anniversary is all hitting me harder this year than it has the previous 2 to 3 years. So I don't know if that's a cycle thing or what, but like I said, everybody who's experienced a loss deals with the grief differently. I was determined I was just going to keep moving forward, because I promised that to Brad that I would keep moving forward there. And some days I am literally on my hands and knees just crawling across the floor. There are days when I bounce out of bed, and other days I just want to curl up and just shut out the world. I recognize that it's the grief and it's taking hold, and it's just sort of like pull myself up, put on my super fantastic sparklingness and get moving, because there's a whole bunch of stuff I've still got to do that I have left to do before I can leave this earth, and I need to get moving. And having Zeffie come into my life when she did has been great, because I was literally just staying in my RV and not going anywhere. So now I have to get out of the RV at minimum twice a day. Sometimes we go more times a day when she wants to go for a walk and stuff. And some days she just goes and curls up on the bed and doesn't want to know. When I go, do you want to go for a walk? And she'll just put her head up, look at me, and just tuck back and curl back up again and snuggle back. And she'll just literally just wriggle around and snuggle back down. I'm like, okay, I asked. But ask her at 5 o'clock, you don't need to ask her. She's out here like, let's go. I'm ready. Okay. And other days I'll just say, come on, let's go. And she'll come out and we'll go for a walk. But yeah, grief sucks. That's all I can leave you with, is that grief sucks. I have met a lot of people who have had spouses pass. We've shared a lot of stories together as well. I have had friends who, since Brad passed, have also had lost their spouses as well. And helping them through their emotions and everything else has helped me too. So when I help others who are just starting this process, it helps me a lot as well. But it's just one of those things that's always going to be there. And I see people moving on and getting married and getting remarried and everything else, and I'm like, yay. And I remember Brad telling me one time during one of our 3 a.m. conversations. And our 3 a.m. conversations are one of those ones that's in the middle of the night when you know the other person is awake, you're both awake, and you know the other person's awake, and you just start having these really, really deep conversations with the lights off, just laying there next to each other, and just having these deep conversations. And not long after he was diagnosed with cancer, he said to me, it was before he died, before he passed with cancer, before he even got diagnosed with cancer the first time around. For some reason, we were up at that hour of the morning. I don't know why. But he said to me, I just want you to know that if I should go before you, that I want you to know that it's okay for you to get remarried. And I just looked at him and said, it ain't going to happen. He looks at me and he goes, no, you should never say that. I says, it ain't going to happen. He goes, why not? I says, you're it. That's it. I says, you're it. Are there times I wish I had somebody with me that, I could go out for dinner with and go to the movies with, just go for drives with, travel in the RV with? Yes, there are times I would love to have Brad there. I always think of Brad when I've been doing these long drives on the road and everything else in the sparkles here. I thought, it'd be really nice just to have somebody who can drive as well, that you can share the driving with, because I would get so much more. We'll get so many more miles done. We would get to where we needed to go sooner. I wouldn't have to do these 2-night stays between trips, because because of the physical and mental thing that you need to when I'm driving the RV. It's very different from driving a car. And I've discovered that driving one day and then stopping overnight and then getting in the RV again and driving the next day was just too much. So now if I'm doing a trip, I only drive a certain number of miles. And then I take a 2-night break, and then I'm back on the road for the next however many miles. So even just driving from Arizona to California, from Arizona down to San Diego, that's, I go down to Yuma, spend a couple of nights in Yuma, and then do the rest into San Diego. And when going from San Diego to Phoenix, I do the reverse. Spend 2 nights in Yuma and then drive up to Phoenix. So just breaking up that trip. Yet in the car, I can do the whole trip from San Diego through Yuma up to Phoenix here, no problem at all. But it's just something about driving an RV that's a different mental wise and very physical. So it's just a whole style of different driving, because you get battered by the wind a little bit in an RV. But anyway, and so yeah, there are times that I wish I had somebody that I could share the driving with, that we could do road trips together with, that go to the movies with, go out for dinner with, just to have conversations with, watch movie, just to hang out with. And Brad's face always shows up every time. So I'm not ready yet. And I always told him that. And I mean, even after he got diagnosed with cancer, he says, I want you to know that if you ever want to get remarried, it's okay with me. And I'm just telling him, no, I'm done. That's it. I says, you're it. And he said, well, if the opportunity arises, it's not going to arrive. I've always told him that. Every time he brings it up, I've always told him it's not going to arrive. But one thing I will tell you this, if I could go back and change anything, he always used to ask me, and I said I wouldn't change a thing. And he goes, not even me getting cancer? I says, not even you getting cancer. He said, why? I says, look at all the challenges we have had to go through with the cancer and everything. And look at the people we are now. We would not be the people we are today. We would not have the lives that we have now, nor would we have some of the friends that we have now had it not been for cancer. And he would have to reflect on that. And at his funeral, when I did his eulogy, I said, you know, if you had asked me that today, I would just ask for more time. And that's all I would ask for, is just more time. But life's not that way. We just got to keep moving forward. And it's just, some days it's picking up my watch, my watch has a second hand on it. This watch he bought me on our very first cruise, because I needed a new watch at the time, and he bought me, and it's one of those eco watches that you can move around and stick in the sunlight, and it recharges the batteries. So it never needs a battery change on it. And the date thing doesn't work on here anymore, but that's okay. It's still the same watch, even the same watch face. The only thing that, like I said, the only thing that doesn't work on this thing is the little date thing, and it's too tiny for me to see anyway. So I'm not really worried about that. But there's times that I will pick up the watch and I'll just look at the second hand and go, Lord, get me through the first 60 seconds. And I would watch that hand go around, and I would use it to help calm my breathing down as well. And just watch it and just breathe through the next 60 seconds. And I'll get through the 60 seconds. Okay, Lord, we're going for 90, you know, and just, you know, sometimes it's a minute at a time. Sometimes it's a few seconds at a time. But just keep moving forward. That's the only advice I can give to people, you know. And if people tell you that you should be over it, punch them. If they go, oh, it's been X number of years, you should be over that by now, just punch them. You have my permission. If somebody tells you should be over your grief by now, punch them. Grief takes as long as it takes, and it's different for every person. So please never, ever, ever tell somebody to get over it. It takes as long as it takes. And as long as you keep moving forward, everything will be okay. And yes, you will have new challenges that come up. Yes, you will have decisions to make that you have to make, and only you alone can make, because you don't have that partner to make those decisions, to talk things out with and share things with, to make those decisions. Yes, you probably have friends that you can bounce the ideas off, but sometimes it takes somebody who's been through what you've been through for them to get it, to understand, because sometimes you've got friends that just don't understand because they haven't been through that before. But all I can say is just keep moving forward, keep your chin up, and just remember, no matter what happens, today is always super fantastic and sparkling. Hei konera.